Have you ever looked up at the sky and felt that it is hiding something urgent and unavoidable? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a cold metallic hum slicing through the night air, a column of pale light that makes the ground smell faintly of ozone and wet stone. Imagine people whispering behind closed doors while a government file collects dust in a ministry archive. In this year, reports and patterns point to a deadline, a narrowing window that ends before 2025 itself closes. And a whisper from the past insists we must listen. Something is approaching, something the world was warned about long ago, but that most dismissed as folklore or error. A famous seer once said that the sky would open and that the world would face visitors before one calendar turns. Before this year ends, decisions will be forced upon us that we cannot unmake. Who will speak for humanity when the veil lifts and the first undeniable sign appears? Before we continue, if you value clear investigation and honest reflection, click like, subscribe, and ring the bell so this fragile conversation can grow. Stay with me to the end, because what follows will not be a simple retelling. It will be an exploration linking a forgotten prophecy to recent evidence and to choices you might one day be called to make. Breathe in, look upward, and prepare, because the story begins with a woman whose words echo into our present. Before we go deeper, a brief pause to ask you to support what this channel does by liking, subscribing, and sharing. If these questions about the sky and hidden evidence matter to you, your engagement helps us keep searching and inviting experts to speak. If you want to see the original documents or the interviews we reference, check the description and leave a comment after the next section so we can bring the most requested materials into a future episode. Hannah Petrova grew up in a small town outside Sofia with her grandmother telling stories of a blind prophet who walked through storms with a clarity that frightened listening officials and soothed terrified neighbors. As a child, Hannah could smell the lavender from the old wooden chest where her grandmother kept letters and rubbings, could taste the iron tang of worry in the air during political meetings, and could feel the vibration of radios when late-night broadcasts switched from music to static. She trained as an archivist and linguist, spending her 20s inside climate-controlled vaults where paper smelled of glue and the past whispered in brittle fonts. In her 30s, a ruined notebook surfaced among estate papers that carried sloppy notes attributed to a translator who once met the seer. That notebook smelled of damp and ash and carried a single line in pencil, a line that suggested a date and a sequence of signs. The loss that turned her private interest into obsession came when a close friend, Lucas Reed, a journalist who had promised to help verify one marginal reference, died under unclear circumstances after reporting on leaked air traffic incidents. She remembers the metallic tang of his last coffee, the humming fluorescence of the newsroom, and the roughness of the press pass he pressed into her palm. Those moments set her on a path that moved from folklore into FOIA requests and into confrontations with officials who preferred silence to answers. Today, Hannah speaks quietly in public but angrily in private, her voice steady like gravimetric tide, because she carries in her head not only a prophecy but the faces of witnesses who reported lights and disruptions and then were told to forget. Her backstory ties directly to the central conflict because the notebook contains a dated warning that she believes matches patterns emerging now, and because she has named enemies and allies who will appear again in this story. You will meet a cast of people who push and pull the narrative. Dr. Elena Ortiz, a physicist who reads sensor data and smells ozone from event sites. Colonel Mark Hayes, a military liaison who tastes copper when nervous and keeps a leather-bound log hidden in a safe. Professor Amir Salim, an astrophysicist who can hear the low subsonic hum recorded in observatories and feels it in his molars. Maria Kovac, a retired intelligence analyst who knows how paper crinkles and how secrets rust into bureaucracy. Agent Jonna Price, an internal affairs investigator who carries the bitter coffee breath of late-night interrogations. Father Mateo, a theologian who hears the echo of ancient psalms in modern fear. Lucas Reed, the late journalist whose notes still warm the archive. And Hannah Petrova, the archivist who refuses to let the notebook be buried. Each of these people appears at different moments, bringing testimony and friction. In a quiet exchange at a remote airfield, the dialogue unfolds like this. Hannah, did you record the lights that night? Colonel Hayes, we recorded anomalies but dismissed them as instrument error. Hannah, your log notes a loss of altitude and a change in ECM. Colonel Hayes, those are preliminary and sensitive. Hannah, sensitive to whom? Agent Price, sensitive to departments that do not want panic. Dr. Ortiz, the waveform does not match any known aircraft. Professor Salim, it matches none of our models. Maria Kovac, I saw a memo that recommended classification. Father Mateo, and I saw men pray in hangars. Lucas Reed, I wrote down names and times. This 8 exchange scene is raw, with each line carrying weight, and with sensory notes of cold tarmac, the grit under boots, the smell of hydraulic fluid, and a distant low hum that everyone feels in their chest. The first hard evidence is not a prophecy alone. It is a pattern of declassified files and recorded testimonies that began appearing in fragments between 2020 and now. In government archives from 3 nations, there are sensor graphs that spike at identical times, reports from military pilots who describe unresponsive metallic spheres and images of lights that dance against common physics. Dr. Elena Ortiz explains to Hannah in a laboratory hallway swollen with fluorescent light and the smell of worn coffee that the spectral data shows coordinated acceleration and deceleration impossible for known craft. A conversation in that corridor between Dr. Ortiz and Professor Salim goes longer with 10 exchanges to map hypotheses in exacting terms. Dr. Ortiz, the acceleration curve is off charts. Professor Salim, that would shatter engines as we know them. Dr. Ortiz, or it uses no engines at all. Professor Salim, then it is a technology we cannot classify. Dr. Ortiz, or it is a form of life moving through fields. Professor Salim, then we must talk biology, not ballistics. Dr. Ortiz, the modeling does not fit biological signatures. Professor Salim, unless it is beyond our categories. Dr. Ortiz, we must publish. Professor Salim, if we publish, there will be pressure. Dr. Ortiz, there has been pressure already. Professor Salim, have you spoken to Maria Kovac? She told me to be cautious. This extended exchange contains 5 sensory notes, including the cold glass of the lab, the hum of servers, the chalk dust smell of whiteboards, the prick of fluorescent glare, and the metallic taste of hurried breathing. Alongside graphs and testimonies, there are leaked videos filmed by pilots and by a civilian named Hannah Park, who captured a sphere that blinked a rhythm that a retired analyst later noticed matched an old radio transmission code. Names repeat throughout the files, adding weight and patterns emerging, not as isolated incidents, but as an orchestrated occurrence appearing in different skies within precisely the same 10-week time frame. The evidence forces a comparison to prophecy and creates the first real fracture between skepticism and belief. As we interpret the prophecy, the parallels multiply. The seer in the notebook used language of signs of the sky and of a visitor arriving before a calendar change. Hannah and Father Mateo read the lines aloud in a church warmed by candle wax and dust, and hear in the phrasing an uncanny match to the new reports. The narrative compares the years 2020 to 2025 and maps the clusters of sightings, the declassifications, and the sudden appearance of specialized task forces. A secondary scene plays out in a cramped coffee shop where Hannah quizzes Agent Jonna Price about withheld memos and where the barista accidentally leaves a metallic cup on the counter, making a bright clatter that freezes the conversation. Their exchange contains 7 direct back-and-forth lines. Hannah, why were these files redacted? Jonna Price, national security. Hannah, national security for whom? Jonna Price, for the population. Hannah, are we being prepared or deceived? Jonna Price, I cannot say in open, but privately? Jonna Price, privately there is fear. Hannah, fear of losing control? This scene has sensory detail of espresso steam, the quick press of paper in a palm, the bitter aftertaste of fear, and the weight of a streetlight hum outside. Questions pile like plates in that shop, and the reader feels the texture of mistrust. The theory of invasion emerges in multiple forms, as plausible scenarios debated by experts and witnesses. Some propose a direct invasion, a kinetic opening, where objects would become visible and hostile within weeks. Others imagine an infiltration, where influence spreads subtly through technology and cultural touchpoints. A third possibility frames the appearance as a staged revelation by factions within governments to control populations. To dramatize these possibilities, a staged role-play conversation takes place inside a secure briefing room lit with blue screens and recycled air, with 10 exchanges illustrating stakes and strategy. Colonel Hayes, if these visitors intend harm, we must prepare rules of engagement. Dr. Ortiz, we still do not know intent. Professor Salim, intent cannot be inferred from motion alone. Maria Kovac, but patterns of surveillance suggest strategic targeting. Agent Price, targeting of what exactly? Hannah, institutions, infrastructure, belief systems. Father Mateo, souls and systems both are at risk. Lucas Reed, I have pieces that show probing behavior. Colonel Hayes, probing can be reconnaissance, not invasion. Dr. Ortiz, reconnaissance can be prelude. Professor Salim, then we need contingency plans. Maria Kovac, and transparency. Agent Price, transparency will cause panic. Hannah, panic can be managed by truth. This series of lines is embedded with 5 sensory descriptions: the chill of conditioned air, the glow of screens, the metallic rasp of a chair, the dry throat of withheld words, and the smell of sterilized adrenaline. The multiplicity of theories forces a moral decision that each listener must imagine facing. One moment of peak tension arrives when a plane returns from patrol, reporting a craft that painted neighborhoods with a low frequency that leaves animals restless and citizens disoriented. The pilot speaks into a recorder, voice clipped with static, while a ground team hears the same tone through a channel. The ground team includes Hannah, Colonel Hayes, Dr. Ortiz, and Agent Price, a compact group whose faces are lit by red console lights and whose hands taste of salt and coffee. In the following exchange, each voice is a lifeline. Pilot, I saw the light and instruments froze. Controller, describe the movement. It hovered, then darted like a fish out of air. Controller, any heat signature? Dr. Ortiz, negative on infrared. Colonel Hayes, rule out drones. Agent Price, we cannot rule anything yet. Hannah, did anyone else see it? Maria Kovac, multiple witnesses reported nausea. Professor Salim, the waveform suggests directed energy. Lucas Reed, I recorded civilian audio of a hum. Father Mateo, I heard men crying on the line. This moment holds the taste of iron on the tongue, the bristle of static in the ears, the cold sweat on the brow, the compressed breath in chests, and the hollow vibration of a city that has lost its calm. The decision made in the following hours reverberates beyond reports. A second decisive tension occurs when a leaked video shows a transparent sphere descending into a wheat field in a rural county, and local farmers find crops altered in ways that disturb both scientists and priests. The dialogue between Professor Salim, Dr. Ortiz, and a farmer named Miguel includes 6 direct lines and is thick with dust and the smell of cut straw. Farmer Miguel, the stalks were hollowed out but not burned. Professor Salim, that does not fit insect damage. Dr. Ortiz, the cellular structure is altered. Farmer Miguel, my cows refuse to drink. Maria Kovac, there was residue on the fence. Father Mateo, people said they heard singing. Hannah, who reported the singing? The sensory palette includes dry chaff underfoot, the metallic lint of residue on gloves, the sour breath of frightened livestock, and the soft, low song that no one can clearly remember. Scientists argue about methods while villagers pray and radio static consumes a frequency. A third moment of tension unfolds in an underground archive where Hannah opens a sealed envelope and finds an old radio log with a code that matches the blinking of lights recorded in several recent videos. The room smells of old paper, mildew, the lamp makes the edges of the pages glow, and Hannah feels a tremor in her fingertips as she reads aloud. The exchange between Hannah Maria Kovac and Agent Price is tense and short, but heavy. Hannah: "This code was recorded in 1973. Maria Kovac: "It was marked sensitive." Agent Price: "Someone kept it from us." Hannah: "It matches the blinking." Maria Kovac: "It suggests planning." Agent Price: "Or communication." The sensory cues here are the papery rasp, the dust motes in lamplight, the cool metal of the safe, the chalky taste of breath, and the distant rumble of a city that keeps moving as secrets accumulate. This discovery collapses time and suggests that what we call new might have been planned across generations. To put the phenomenon in context, we look to history and religion where similar motifs appear. Ancient tablets from coastal cultures describe silver shapes that rose from waves, leaving sailors with songs in their ears. A medieval chronicle mentions stars that walk the earth, and a Buddhist text records a departure of sky guests who taught mathematics and then left. Father Mateo reads fragments in a monastery chapel that smells of incense and wet stone and compares them aloud to the seer notebook. The narrative weaves in names like Elena Ortiz, Mark Hayes, Amir Salim, Maria Kovac, Jonah Price, Lucas Reed, Father Mateo, and Hannah Petrova, and shows how across epochs people have tried to interpret apparent contact as omen or opportunity. The parallel suggests three enduring human responses: curiosity, fear, and devotion, and shows how each can be harnessed or weaponized. A measured paragraph draws the line between myth and plausible pattern and asks whether repetition across cultures increases the probability that we face a genuine external agent or whether humans simply pattern match to reduce existential anxiety. The next section sketches three vivid future scenarios, each laden with sensory detail and moral consequence. Scenario 1 is an overt revelation, ending with visible ships assembling in skies, cities lit by alien glyphs, and immediate global panic and conflict. Imagine a night sky blooming with shapes that hum and cast a perfume of ozone over capitals as people taste the metallic tang of fear and watch stadiums fill with anxious citizens. The social consequence is abrupt centralization of power and contested narratives, with generals, politicians, and priests arguing for control. Scenario 2 is slow infiltration, where technology and media begin to carry subtle mimetic changes, and leaders wake up one morning to find algorithms nudging opinions in ways that benefit an external agenda. In this scenario, the air smells of burnt circuits, the screens glow a shade too calm, and ordinary conversations feel peppered with unfamiliar words. Communities fracture, as some embrace the changes as gifts and others resist seeing manipulation. Scenario 3 is a negotiated contact, a painful process of mutual learning fraught with misinterpretation and risk where scientists and theologians share long nights of translation. The sensory frame includes the chill of sealed meeting rooms, the taste of bitter tea during translation sessions, the soft rustle of paper, and the crackle of old radios bridging gaps. Each scenario asks a question about unity. Will humanity respond with division or with a collective ethic that preserves dignity across difference? At roughly 1/3 into this narrative, I want to hear from you. I understand this is unsettling, and I know many will sit on the fence between skepticism and belief. Take a moment in the comments and finish this sentence. Start your reply with, "I would prepare," or "I would refuse," and then briefly say why. Your answers help us shape future episodes because we are compiling what ordinary people think normal governments and community leaders might do. If you are moved by the evidence we present here, say so and point to the piece that convinced you most. If you are skeptical, tell us which claim you believe needs more proof. This is not a poll, it is a living record of stance and value. Join a conversation others will read, and our researchers will consider your voices when inviting guests. Now, back to the evidence that cannot be ignored. Concluding this investigation, we must reflect on choices and on practical steps. The call now is not simply to fear, but to prepare with clarity, to insist on transparent reporting, to support researchers like Dr. Alina Ortiz and Professor Amir Salim, to protect whistleblowers like Maria Kovacs and journalists like Lucas Reed, to demand that officials like Colonel Mark Hayes and Agent Jonah Price consider public interest, and to ask spiritual leaders like Father Mateo to lead conversations about meaning. The final scene is a quiet community meeting held under streetlights smelling of rain, where neighbors share canned food lists and contact numbers, and where Hannah,
the crowd, tastes the salt of tears and the warmth of candle wax, and the murmur of voices becomes a small song of unity. The concluding tone is that of a call to collective stewardship, not panic. Epilogue. 1 month from now, public attention focuses on verification. Satellite firms release raw telemetry, and Dr. Elena Ortiz and Professor Amir Salim publish a joint preprint that outlines anomalies. In city halls across 3 countries, citizens gather to hear briefings and to ask for independent oversight. Hannah organizes a petition and gains signatures from activists and from a retired pilot named Miguel who remembers hollowed crops. Maria Kovac quietly resigns from an intelligence post and sends her files to a neutrally funded archive. In this first month, the mood is tense but disciplined. People sense that transparency is possible and that naming witnesses like Lucas Reed and others matters. There is an increase in community meetings and in the number of independent researchers who share data openly. Epilogue. 3 months from now, a peace of sorts is negotiated between scientific teams and a public information office tasked with communicating verified findings. A carefully curated public archive appears, and small local councils begin to practice protocols for emergencies. Skeptics remain active, and some factions try to use the situation for political advantage. But a coalition of civil society groups, religious leaders, and frontline scientists forms a network for ethical oversight. Hannah and Dr. Ortiz present testimony in a public forum, and their voices carry the dry smell of old paper and the resonant clarity of people who have faced fear and chosen to record it. New cultural practices begin to emerge. Citizens practice listening to verified signals before reacting, and schools teach basic media literacy about anomalies and patterns. Epilogue. 6 months from now, the world is altered in subtle but profound ways. Some governments have adjusted airspace rules and rerouted certain flight corridors. International bodies convene to discuss standardized recording practices and to fund transparent laboratories for independent analysis. An artist collective in Lisbon installs a piece that plays recorded hums and light patterns to help people habituate fear into study and into civic engagement. Farmers like Miguel receive support for altered crops, and a compensation scheme is debated. The economy shows shifts as markets react to uncertainty and as new research industries form around anomaly analysis. There are casualties, and there are those whose lives are forever changed by direct encounters, but there is also an emerging ethic about how to handle contact and how to preserve human dignity. Names of those involved, like Elena Ortiz, Mark Hayes, Amir Salim, Maria Kovac, Jonah Price, Lucas Reed, Father Mateo, and Hannah Petrova, become associated not with panic, but with a contested but hopeful attempt at collective responsibility. In closing, what began as a whisper from a forgotten notebook now meets a growing body of evidence and a series of hard questions.
About what we value and how we respond. The documents, the testimonies, and the prophetic line converge to present a possibility that is unsettling and therefore essential to examine with calm and rigor. Our choice will shape whether we fragment or whether we come together to build institutions that are honest, open, and resilient. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share so we can continue to investigate and to bring experts into the conversation. Leave your comment beginning with "I would prepare" or "I would refuse" and tell us why, so this community can learn from itself. The sky holds its secrets, but we unlearn silence by asking persistent questions and by keeping our hands steady when the lights begin to move.